You guys can see my screen?
Mhm.
Great. Everybody can see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. I was sitting in the waiting room for a few minutes, but everything everything looks good now. So I think everybody can see like one side of my head and then this screen. So that works. So my name is David Patrick. I am a social worker, graduate from the University of Maine in Orono, but I have attended classes at the University of Maine Augusta, the Bangor campus, as well as the Ellsworth campus. I've also attended classes at the University of Southern Maine. While at the University of Maine, I was involved in a lot of student organizations and activities, but I think probably the one that's most applicable here is I was president of the Non-Traditional Student and Commuter Student Association. In that role, I work primarily with students from diverse backgrounds, students that maybe fell outside of like the median age of typical college students, students living off campus, students with accessibility issues to campus, transportation, things like that, parents, students supporting, their own parents, and vice versa. So, and I also use he, him pronouns as well. So we're going to talk about diversity, inclusion, and racial equity in professional academic setting. Really, I think with everyone's background here, there's a multitude of different experiences that you're bringing to the table, and so our primary goal is to provide supports for you in the unique setting or space that you're going to be responsible for. So really quickly, right? People hear diversity trainings. I think there's a lot of caricatures and a lot of misinterpretations that get associated with diversity trainings. There's a lot of stigma when you throw out words like privilege or race or identity, and it's often misconstrued. And the work that we do is often misrepresented. I don't think I say the word, white or privilege or anything like that in a context in our trainings at all. And so there's just a lot of stereotypes around DEI work in general. And so just a quick kind of overview of our communal agreements. First of all, this is not meant to make anybody feel guilty. We don't do a lot of blame, or we don't assign a lot of blame. We don't do a lot of guilt tripping. If you were a person from a marginalized community, or if you're a person from a very privileged community, your experience in this training and workshop should be similar. No one person or identity group of people should feel as though this training is targeted to making them feel guilty, and no one should feel like this training or workshop is designed to make them feel superior to anybody else either. So one of the communal agreements that we like to use is respect. Pretty standard in any space is respect. I think the other one is one voice, all ears. In Zoom, that's a little bit easier to navigate because we can mute people, people can silence themselves and things like that. But I think what would be synonymous with one voice, all ears in a Zoom setting would certainly be body language. When other people are talking, whether they're saying stuff you agree with or disagree with, rolling your eyes, shaking your head, visibly kind of showing disdain for what people are communicating is probably not great, and it makes doesn't always make the space safe. So Again, it's confidential. It's confidential. The whole space is going to be confidential. Nothing that gets said here is going to be shared outside of, who sees this recording. So at this point, I'd like to ask people, right? So a lot of people here have a lot of different backgrounds. What are some communal agreements that you think we should try to uphold in this space when we're talking about sensitive topics like diversity, equity, and inclusion? If people want to unmute themselves and share, that's great, or people can put stuff in the chat as well. Keeping an open mind, great. Anybody else? Non-judging, definitely using I statements, keeping your bias to yourself. Non-personal experiences is different from that of others. Great, I like that. I like that. Make space for people with marginalized voices over white people. Right, I think the last comment where it says make space for people with marginalized voices over white people. I think marginalized voices in general, right? I am a cisgendered male. I have a lot of privilege, and so if we're talking about gender equity issues and gender equality, then I would probably have my voice take a step back to let people of a different gender identity in academia or in the workplace speak. So I think without maybe specifying a specific identity, I just think if a dominant group in society and somebody else is self-identified that they're part of a marginalized community, certainly stepping back and letting them communicate what their lived experiences, instead of, like other people said, having a bias or making assumptions. So I like all of those. Those are great. So we're going to jump right into our first exercise. So if everybody has a piece of paper, scrap paper, it doesn't have to get too fancy. We are going to explore identity. Right, like we hear diversity, we hear equity, we hear inclusion. A lot of the times we think it's only race-based and maybe sprinkled in with a little bit of religion and maybe some support for the LGBTQ community. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is all encompassing. If you look at this graphic right here, you'll see that education, family, a person's work role, their language, age, right? Ageism is a really big thing nowadays on both sides. People feeling as though maybe a person doesn't have the experience to do something because of their age, but then also feeling as though somebody older might not be able to have the capacity to do other tasks as well. And so it's a spectrum. On here we have economic status, right? What your resources are, what your standing in society is as far as your ability to navigate the planet financially. And then we have others as we get into the middle here, right? Personality, communication style. All of us probably have been in a classroom at one point or another, and the way material is being presented wasn't probably conducive to our learning style. Instead of a one size fits all, there's diversity in the way people learn. People are visual learners. People are learn verbally through doing examples. So if everybody could take just we'll say 2 or 3 minutes and write down as many identities that you can come up with, using this circle as a guide. And then we'll go around and share. Great. Does anybody want to start us off with what they listed for identities? I can give an example. So for race, I identify as a Black male, and I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Education. I have a lot of privilege with education. I started off with a lot of privilege when I was younger with education, and I was able to get a graduate degree from a university and get a scholarship as well. And so I think that has to do a little bit with socioeconomic status. Family. I grew up in a two-parent household and live with my children currently. I'll switch over to neurotypical and neurodivergent. I don't struggle with any challenges, but in my professional role, I support individuals with autism and Asperger's diagnosis, and those are my primary clients, and I support them as a care coordinator and social worker. Time equity, I think is a unique one, but one that really dictates a lot of these other categories. Time equity, I have a little bit of time equity, and what time equity is the amount of the day that you can do what you want. Meaning, do you work 2 jobs to support your family? If you're not working 2 jobs, do you have a family member or a parent who you're a caregiver for, and you're responsible for their medical care, or preparing their meals, or taking them to and from something like dialysis? And then, so that's pretty self-explanatory. So does anybody want to share?
I'll go. This is Lisa. I identify as a white woman who has a college education, grew up in a two-parent household, but parents got divorced. I'm currently a single mom. I work in higher education. I am neurotypical. I speak English as my first language. I'm middle-aged. I'm a Christian. I am in the middle class section. And I am definitely personality-wise, I am an extrovert who likes to talk things out.
Excellent. Right. I like how you added likes to talk things out, right? I think in a lot of settings based on leadership or management or just the culture, people's personality and communication styles may not always be considered, especially maybe if there's a conflict, right? If maybe you're more introverted and you don't do well speaking on the spot, maybe you'd like to send an email and have some time to reflect on your thoughts before engaging in something, but you're being pressured into having a face-to-face conversation that automatically makes you feel as though you're not going to be able to communicate effectively. And so I like that. I like how you address that. And so does anybody else want to go actually before I make another comment?
Yeah, I'll go. I identify as a white male. I'm poor, I'm pagan, I'm middle-aged. English is my only language. I'm neurodivergent, but I'm diagnosed. My culture is Southwestern America. I'm unemployed, but I am a student. I'm an only child. I have no children of my own, and I've never been married. I am struggling with disabilities, mostly involving balance and cognition.
Great. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing that, especially I appreciate you trusting everybody in the group enough to share some of those more personal details. So yeah, right. So your identity and your experience certainly impact how you navigate, whether it's navigating the campus, navigating the community. That plays a big part. What you just said plays a really big part in your day-to-day stuff. So the point of this exercise is to evaluate your identity, but then to start to look at parts of your identity that could be marginalized, right? And so as we move on, we're not gonna do all these questions. My apologies. So think of some of the identities that you have. And let's go from there. So question number 2, it says, this is the identity that I am most aware of at work or in the community. And then, I'm sorry, right above that, it says, this is the identity I'm most aware of at home. So if somebody could answer both questions, so the identity you're aware of most at home and the identity you're aware of most in your in the spaces you navigate within the University of Maine Augusta system. And so for me, I'll give an example. When I'm in the community, I'm most aware of being a Black male by far. Like, I think it just kind of goes without saying. But when I'm home, I'm most aware of being a dad. And I think being a dad supersedes all of those identities. And so if I'm in the community with my kids, dad supersedes race, above and beyond. I'm more aware of what their needs are and the dynamic of being in public spaces and keeping them safe and watching out and, kind of being a parent in a public space. So it depends. So those are two different kind of situations where I reflect on my identity differently. Does somebody else want to share?
Yes, I'll share. My name is Wayne Clark. I am a father of 9 kids that I don't live with right now. A couple of them have passed away because of my fiance losing them through her miscarriages. But I'm definitely a father. I'm very supportive of my kids. I lost a couple, and I just lost another one a few days ago. So, it's hard, but I'm supportive of my fiance and my kids.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's really,
Sorry
really
to hear about your
difficult.
loss. I hate to interrupt, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Sam. Anytime if you need to take a step back, or anytime, actually, I forgot to say that at any time if the discussion, people need to take a step back, feel free. No questions asked. Thank you for sharing that, Alan. So right, you're more aware about that, and obviously it sounds like that part of your identity is kind of something you're aware of in this space as well. So let's actually move on to a different question. So people seem to be pretty trusting in this group, and again, like, everything's confidential, but the next question I'm going to go to is this one that says, this is the identity I tend to keep hidden from our team. And our team can just be synonymous with the people that around on campus. For me, when I'll use University of Maine as an example. For me, like, I think one of the things I probably kept hidden was the fact that I'd been incarcerated when I was younger. I definitely didn't tell people that because I thought it was going to automatically stigmatize me, which it does, and it always does, right? It does. Like, it's still not around it. I think the difference is now, I have a lot of privileged identities, so the ability for people to marginalize me has been diminished through my own privilege. And that's really disappointing, that if I, didn't have letters after my professional license and wasn't known throughout the community, that I would be probably marginalized even more. So that's my identity. Does somebody else have one they'd like to share? Sullivan shared one. I often keep my identity as a trans person under my hat. Right. I think a lot of people do. Unfortunately, that's something a lot of people don't feel comfortable being their authentic selves in certain spaces, either due to safety, physically, or mental health, or just not wanting to have to be on parade and subject yourself to other people.
I don't have an identity personally, but this question makes me think. So I work on the Bangor campus, and there are a lot of people I find that they like to keep hidden the fact that they are in recovery due to stigma.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So right, that's like kind of what we're here to talk about is biases, right? And so biases, how those shape our opinions, right? Like when people are talking about their children, when people are talking about, you know, gender fluidity, when people are talking about being incarcerated or being in recovery, like we start, oh, well, I wonder what they did. Well, I wonder, you know, I wonder how they do identify. Oh, what was their, I wonder how addicted they were, right? Like we start to kind of think these things and make a picture of a person based on our perception of what people from that identity should look like, or what the representations in media or on television or our families have depicted these people to look like. So actually that brings us to the next section. I know we only have about an hour and a half, so we are going to we're gonna bump around just a little bit. So in the sense of biasness, without looking at this, what is diversity? I know, of course, people can read this, but kind of in your own words, what is diversity?
Well, I think of diversity as just being a wide variety of different kinds of people coming together for a cause or a reason or an event, and that each person is unique and hopefully appreciated for who they are.
Great. Yeah, you got a little bit. You touched a little bit on inclusion when you said, appreciated for who they are. Great. I like that. I like that a lot. So if that's diversity, then and we heard a little bit about what inclusion is. Does somebody want to build more on inclusion?
Inclusion means that everybody's contributions at any level count the same. We're not, my efforts and contribution is not worth less because of the group that I belong to.
Or worth more because of the group you belong to, right? I think it's a double-sided thing. So great. I really like that answer. So what is equity? If we have diversity, we have inclusion, right? We see DEI everywhere. We see the acronym. We hear people talking about. But what is equity, right? What's the difference between equality and equity? Why isn't it diversity, equality, and inclusion? And why do we use the word equity?
I would say equity is giving the tools necessary for everybody to reach the same goal, whereas equality would be giving everyone the same exact tool to reach a goal. Whether or not that person needs that tool or not wouldn't matter in equality versus in equity, if that made any sense.
It does. Do you have an example? You're on the right track. That was exactly what I would have said.
Yeah, so like I used to work on cars, and a lot of the guys would be able to like something like taking off a tire. They could just use a wrench and get the lug nuts off really easily, but they're usually torqued on to more than my weight. So for me to get them off, it would usually take a different tool, at least a bigger tool, or using a pneumatic air gun rather than a wrench, something like that. I guess I can't think of anything else.
Right. No, that's a good example, right? Different tools for to help people complete the same job or the same task. That's a really good example. Another one I think of is right on a college campus setting. Right? Everybody is welcome to apply to attend, UMaine Augusta. but whether or not you have the financial ability to attend is based on, you know, financial aid. So financial aid is an equity tool, right? It allows somebody who doesn't have $10,000 in their bank account to attend a university, and so that's equity. That's a tool that's given to somebody who maybe doesn't have the immediate example. The immediate resources to do that. So, what types of diversity exist on campus? Right, we've heard a lot from people about their own backgrounds, but what other types of diversity do people hear, see, feel?
I guess economic standing, as far as some people are on scholarships, and I guess the higher, more Ivy League schools would be possibly more prevalent in the like higher economic, but there are still individuals that are in community college or the universities that I think are, the disparity can be seen.
Great, right. Yeah, there's certainly a big difference between the perception of what an Ivy League school and what maybe a community college or small university or college is. But right, there's students that go to both schools that are just as smart as each other, even though it's a different title. So that's a good example. What else? What else do we see in the chat? I'm trying to read this. In the classes I've attended at UMA, age, sexual orientation, right? Great, exactly. What about from faculty? What about from one class to another?
Well, I'm taking online classes, and all of the professors are always very cognizant of letting people know about different resources that are available to help with, you know, like writing papers or, you know, technology, ways that like kind of help to level the playing field, because not everybody, you know, has the best computer or, you know, has a lot of experience with writing or as much of a quality high school experience as others. So I think that that's really important.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. So right, so that's diversity, that's inclusion, that's equity, all in that example, right? You were listing being inclusive of other people's experiences, including resources and tools to help level the playing field. Right, like that was really good. That was included just about everything. So the last two questions: why are discussions of diversity, inclusion, anti-racism, racial equality important for workplaces? Should they be avoided? And the second question is, what are the positive and negative impacts of DEI work? That's a slippery slope to go down, but I have some comments on that. What do people think the positives of diversity, equity, and inclusion is?
Greater worldview, the diversity allowing to see the situation from a lot of different perspectives. Right?
Excellent answer. Yeah, that's great. That's excellent.
I think it also comes down to being able to relate to one another's backgrounds and being able to learn from each other's experiences.
Great, right? So shared experience, learning from other people's experience, maybe identify with other people a little bit more. What else do we have?
Just learning people's backgrounds is where we, you know, learn from our past experiences as well.
Great, great. So learning from other people's experiences and their backgrounds as well.
Yep.
Great, great. I like those. I like those. So, who wants to dare to answer why DEI work, what the negative impacts of DEI work are? It's a little bit of a trick question. So we put that in there just for some awareness. So as I started off, DEI work is not political work. It's really disappointing as a trainer and a training facilitator who's worked with people from preschool age students all the way to to college graduates and non-traditional students and everything in between. When DEI work gets categorized as the political, one political identity owns this work and one is opposed to this work. I think the negatives that I've seen that come from DEI work is that it's created, people have made policies to limit discussions on DEI. People have made things like Black History Month optional to attend. Indigenous Peoples Day has been a day that if you still want to celebrate Columbus Day, then you can do that as well, even though it's national, not a holiday anymore. It's been labeled as an attack on things like Christmas or discussing the month of December that has lots of different faith-based groups and identities in it has been labeled as an attack. And so I would say those are the negatives, and we do our best to not have any type of politics or political discussions overlap with DEI. It's 100% independent of any political party. No one party. It shouldn't be politicized because it devalues the safety and experiences of people in the LGBTQ community, people with various gender identities, immigrant communities, English language learners, people of color, people with disabilities, exceptionalities, neurodivergence. It undermines all of that for reasons that aren't necessary. So if anybody tries to tell you that, tell them that's not the case, because it's just trying to create equity for everybody. So we're gonna jump down here. So culturally responsive space. Culture refers to a wide range of identities and community characteristics, right? We've talked about that quite a bit. Diversity and identity represents a wide variety of individual characteristics and communities as well. And so culturally responsive workplace is a culture that exists when workplaces are safe. And so we are going to do that right now. So I'm just going to slide down here. So we're going to do another exercise. So this one is, I'd like everybody again to take out a piece of paper to list some things about safety. So we're going to do two things. We are going to examine what an unsafe space would look like. So what characteristics or what do you think would make a space unsafe? Whether it was a classroom, whether it was a workplace, whether it was an organization, a community, a group of people, what would make that space unsafe? And if it's already unsafe, would it be more unsafe for somebody from an underrepresented community, right? If the space is unsafe, would it be more unsafe for somebody who maybe identifies as trans, or somebody who has a disability or exceptionality? So somebody who's neurodiverse. So let's go ahead and do the unsafe exercise, and then we will shift to doing the safe exercise. So we'll take another 2 or 3 minutes to make that list. Just got a phone call from Egypt. It's got to be spam. I don't know if they would just be calling me randomly from Egypt, but perfect. So what do we have, right? I think it's only about your. Oh yeah, the vehicle warranty. Yeah, right. It's funny. Oh boy. So what do we have for unsafe spaces, right? Like what would make a space unsafe for you, either as an individual or in general for everyone?
I put that everyone looks, dresses, and acts the same, especially privileged identities. So for example, white older men in suits. And secondly, opinions or feedback are discouraged. Again, in counter to the main idea. And also that posters, artwork, training materials, etc., all reflect the dominant culture.
That's a good one. Those are really good. Those are like the examples I usually would give, especially the visual representation of a space. Before you even get in there, it looks like you're already not welcome or not represented at least. Great. So what else do we have? What else do we have that makes a space unsafe?
You also have like being harassed sexually and non-sexually.
Yeah, harassment, right? Or it's not right. We've all worked, well, hopefully not. I've worked at places where people say stuff and they give you like the little elbow nudge. And I'm like, I actually don't agree with that at all. And they harass people and nothing happens. And then people see that and think that that's allowed in that space, especially when people in leadership roles are doing it without repercussions. So certainly that's unsafe. What else do we have?
So I was thinking of it from more of someone with physical disabilities having a space that is not accessible. There's too much clutter or furniture in the room, or if there's a step up to get into the classroom. It would be unsafe for someone who doesn't have balance or is in a wheelchair and it's not accessible.
Yeah, there is buildings at the University of Maine that you cannot get into without assistance if you are utilizing a wheelchair. And the solution is that they have somebody come assist you, which if you want autonomy and independence, right? Nobody's assisting anybody else. It's the point of things being accessible, is that you would like to be able to do it on your own. So great. That's a really good example. And so what else do we have?
I also think you got a lot of stigmatism. Like most inmates or prisoners, now known as residents, we get a lot of stigmatism while we're in and as we get out.
Oh, yeah, 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 right. And so let's think about that. I like that example. So if a stigma, whether it's on a college campus or in the community, is unsafe, right? If that's unsafe for you, then how do you think maybe an inmate with, I don't want to say inmate, that's not even a culturally aware language. Somebody who's recently released is coming into the community, and maybe they don't have a lot of financial resources. Maybe they're a person of color. How do you think they're going to be treated in that community? I can't see me. I'm sorry. Returning citizen, yes, thank you.
Yeah, ostracized and isolated, both kind of like playing into each other, but less open arms. And you spoke on the word, said the word earlier, inclusion. So they're again not able to, or at least perceived barrier because of whether it be body language or however the case may be, or outright hostility towards them. So yeah, isolation and disconnection.
Oh yeah, yep. So I dealt with all of that. So right, I said one of the identities that I just don't tell anybody is I was incarcerated. And the stigma, right? I remember I got incarcerated as a college student. I was plucked off of the University of Maine campus and put in a correctional institution, and had to reapply from a jail cell and do all of that. And the stigma when I got out was really bad. It was really, 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 really bad. Even from people I trusted. And so whether it's incarceration, whether it's a disability or an exceptionality, whether it's just any of the things that we listed, I forgot what the first one was. They're unsafe, right? And if the more marginalized you are, the more unsafe those things become because of what was said. What was said by Mary earlier, that your ability for feedback, representation, advocacy, all starts to drastically diminish. Especially if there's nobody that looks like you or identifies with you, or like Ben was saying, has a shared experience or can understand your experience. You're gonna really struggle, and it's not gonna be a safe space. And nobody should want to be in a space like that, even if you're the dominant group, because that could easily flip upside down. And you could be in a situation where you're not. So in that same breath, what does a safe space look like? So what does a safe classroom look like? What does a safe campus look like? What does a safe community look like? What are those characteristics?
Being supportive.
Inclusive.
Right. So instead of feedback is stifled, maybe there's a healthy avenue and a structure in place for people to share their opinions. Right. Not being quick to judge. Right. I like that as well. Or to make judgments, right? We make judgments because it's easier. It's easier for us to judge. Is this person a good person? Is this a safe person? Is this, am I in danger? And it's evolved to a point where we're excluding people and isolating people based on biases. accommodating. But it's hearing it's more helping with people facing when speaking, right? Communicating what people's needs are. Great, great. So here's a checklist where you are welcome to and encouraged to share. Exactly. Exactly. I like that. I like that a lot. Successful people in management who look like you, right? I've worked at a lot of places where there's been a handful of underrepresented community members, other people from maybe smaller demographics, but they certainly weren't in leadership roles at all. At all. And I know I recently was given an opportunity to work somewhere. I looked at the job on LinkedIn and see a couple people of color. I see, somebody with a rainbow flag in their profile, and it starts to tell me that the equity and inclusion might be a priority there. So safe space. Speaking of the rainbow flag, that's a really easy thing, right? People can do safe space trainings. I know a lot of classrooms, a lot of professional office spaces, people have the little corner sticker. So it'll be like a little sticker in the corner of your door, the glass on your door, and it will just be a rainbow flag, right? And like seeing that, people know that, my identity is welcome here. My lived experience is validated in this space. And so things like that, very small, symbolic things that, yes, they're performative to a degree, but they create safety. And when I see those, I said, at least they're making the attempt to demonstrate inclusion. But here's some other things. So safe space. Employees are their authentic selves. So you're able to go to work and not have to hide your identity, not have to change the way you speak, or if you're a person of color, straighten your hair to be accepted, or hide the fact that maybe you have you've had certain challenges, or you have a certain family or relationship dynamic. Those things, you don't have to broadcast them. That's not what we're saying. Everybody doesn't need to know every detail about you the minute you walk in. But if you wanted to share those things in an appropriate professional context of self-disclosure, you wouldn't be discriminated against or treated differently. Number 2, identity is celebrated, not erased. How many people have ever heard, "I don't see color"? Right? Like we've all heard, "I don't see color." And that was a prevailing kind of academic approach to diversity for much of like the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. But not seeing color, right, is synonymous with not seeing an accessibility ramp, not having Braille, right? Not seeing the things that people need to be safe in a space. Because if I'm a hearing individual and I'm going through a space with a client or another individual who's deaf, I can't expect them to just accept whatever safety I've predetermined that it's going to be up to my standard. I'm a hearing person. I don't know what they need to be safe, and vice versa with any identity. Like I said, I'm a cisgendered male. I don't know what somebody with a different gender identity needs to feel safe and have their voice respected and have equity in that space. And if I just looked at them the same, then they might not have the equity in that space. So I like this, again, kind of what Mary was saying, a little bit of what Ben was saying, is that space is created for all voices to be heard. Not only are you asked your opinion, there's a very concrete way that is able to be articulated on how your opinion can be implemented in the decision-making process, if that's appropriate based on your role, right? If it's group work, classroom work, projects, things like that. All people feel respected and demonstrate respect. It's the easiest thing, and we don't always do it. None of us always do it, but it should be something that we're striving towards. And certainly any identity group that's being disrespected, it should be called out and addressed immediately. Diverse representation of all aspects of the workplace. Again, somebody said this earlier: posters, brochures, pamphlets, materials, marketing materials. At the very least, it needs to be there. At the very best, the marketing materials should look like the campus looks like. Because on the other end of the spectrum, you don't want to overrepresent diversity that's not authentic, and you wouldn't want to have a bunch of people of a certain identity that don't go to your school or participate in your programs, because that would be not accurate either. Equitable. Sorry. The space is equitable, right? There's opportunities, there's resources. It's a clear path to have success, and it's anti-bias, anti-assumption, anti-racist, anti-bigoted, and people speak up. And there's a way for people to speak up that doesn't cause more harm, right? We've all been in a situation where somebody's made a joke, made a comment, done something offensive, and we wished we had the courage to say something, but we didn't. There needs to be resources to be able to make those reports, whether it's anonymous reporting or systems like that, especially if people in positions of power, and a report could cost somebody their job, or they feel like they're going to be retaliated against. Here's a couple more things. Again, employees can challenge stereotypes and biases without repercussions. Diverse community members hold various positions in the workplace, in the workspace, including those who create policies and decisions. There is a shared cultural humility, right? Everybody's a learner, everybody's a teacher. Just because somebody is a student who may be 18 years old doesn't mean another student who might be a veteran who's in their mid-40s, or another faculty who's close to retirement. All of those people can learn something from each other. And then I'd like to say, I think this is a big one. I think this is the easiest place to start, especially for school systems and people on campuses. Everyone's identity is represented around the workplace, right? I use Christmas as an example. Christmas is a great holiday, so I celebrate Christmas. But when I go into schools in December, I'll often highlight Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, solstice, Chinese New Year, pagan holidays. Depending on what the calendar cycle is, there's a lot of different faith groups and spiritual identities who have celebrations. And so if you're in a setting and everybody's having a certain gathering or get together, and you maybe have a different identity, you're not going to feel included. But so that's just a consideration. What time is it? It's 2:05. Okay, so we have only one more section. So I'll go over this wheel really quickly. I meant to, Ben, I'm gonna send this to you, so I forgot to tell everybody. So everybody who attended today is going to get a copy of this guide for your own personal resource, so you can use it, you can reflect on it. Let me, actually, I won't try to drag and drop it into the chat, but everybody will get this. And so this discussion isn't supposed to be an end all be all. This is supposed to really be an introduction and just make sure the sail is kind of set straight before going off and having a lot of these discussions. I encourage you, people in leadership roles or people in organizations on campus or groups to have these same discussions, to share your identities in spaces, to talk about what identity you're most aware of in this space, to talk about what can be done to make the space safer, right? Are you in a building that maybe isn't accessible? Are there things like well-lit walkways at night when people are walking to their cars, right? Like there's things that in past trainings that have come up. Like as a male, I walk to my car, don't even think twice about it. Some of the other individuals in training with different gender identities said that they have their cell phone in one hand, they have mace in another hand, they have their keys kind of in another hand, and that getting out of class late in the winter and walking across campus is a really, really uncomfortable experience for them. So go through the spaces that you're currently in and see what safety improvements can be done. And how the space could be more safe. But anyways, let me blow this up just a little bit. So this is our equity and inclusion wheel. This is proprietary. We developed it. I say that we did it on Canva. It's our language though, but and we asked that it not be like distributed for people who don't attend the trainings. But this is the steps. This is what we do to make a space more diverse, right? Because we get all this stuff and you get all these ideas and somebody says, oh, we need to be more equitable and inclusive and all this, but it's hard, right? It's hard to make that a tangible thing. It's hard to go from diversity, equity, and inclusion as a philosophy to a set of concrete actions that tangibly build change. Like everybody can say, I'm not going to be racist, but then that doesn't necessarily change the amount of people from diverse backgrounds coming into your programs or you see on campus. So number one, really the first thing is examining existing policies. Laws, workplace regulations, public statements, reporting processes, are these equitable, right? And so if somebody from a protected class, either somebody with a disability, exceptionality, somebody gender identity, someone religious or spiritual identity, if somebody discriminates against them, somebody does something unsafe to them, what are the policies? Knowing who to talk to. Is there a Title IX person? Is there an affirmative action, officer? What are the workplace regulations if you are feeling like inappropriate jokes are being made that target a certain identity? How can you report that? What is the reporting system? Like understanding that, just basically of if something happens, how would I ever go about bringing somebody's attention to it, right? That's the very first thing is just knowing what the policies are. We dealt with a situation where a student of color was called the N-word repetitively, and they told the other student to shut the F up. The student of color got a 5-day suspension, and the student who used the racial slur was given 3-day suspension because they said, well, they were both swearing. And that's one of our big no's. That's one of our, the F-bomb is one of our big no's. And like, we were like, I can't even, I'm not gonna waste my time explaining what my reaction was, but it wasn't good. But they needed that education. They didn't have a policy in place for that. It was, and their justification was, we can't suspend somebody for longer than what the maximum amount is for getting in a verbal argument in the hallway, an aggressive argument. Now this same place, it's 2 week suspension. You have to go through a restorative justice process to come back into the school. And so but before we started working with them, that word was flying around a lot. It was being done in the bathroom, right? The bathroom maximizes the most harm, right? Because it's premeditated, it's out of range of any type of disciplinary authority, and it's there's no witnesses, right? So it's done in the most secluded place that it could happen. So we looked at those policies. Number 2, examining workplace culture attitudes. We're on the like the forest green shape right now. So is the overall workplace culture equitable, celebratory, inclusive? And if not, what can be done? Like I said, a lot of this stuff, changing the posters, acknowledging Indigenous Peoples Day. If that's not a day that everybody has off, instead of people having to use their personal time, offering those days off, asking people when they first get hired if there's any spiritual observances that they need off, instead of making people take sick time to celebrate and observe culturally important days for their identity. This includes things like paternity leave, right? Are there opportunities for people adopting, people grieving, people who've had, some of the experiences that Wayne was listing? Is there space for, those kind of gender-specific parental roles? Are those is there space for people to have diverse family backgrounds, I guess? One local school district just awarded 2 days off to celebrate the end of Ramadan. Exactly, right? So that's something we've dealt with a lot. Usually working with coaches, a lot of athletes are going to practice after school. They haven't, right? They've been fasting. And so teachers at the end of the day, being more patient. If this person's not, maybe they don't look a little bit tired because they're not interested in the materials, because they're fasting and their body is adjusting to that. We recently dedicated a space. And so now when students at a different academic institution first attend class, in the syllabus, they're given the space on campus where they can go pray. I used to have students come into my office several times a day to pray because based on the way my office was facing, but more so I worked in the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and they felt safe coming to my office to pull out a prayer rug and pray. And so I would step out of my office, shut the door, and let them pray, and then they'd just leave the door open when they were done. So now the syllabus is actually going to include a designated space. So students don't feel like they have to say, I have to go to the bathroom, because that's more acceptable than going to pray. Community engagement and outreach. So this is community engagement, reaching out to people like, right, I'm from Maine. I've gone academically, professionally, communally, organizationally. Has been really centric to Maine. I was not born in Maine, but I've lived in Maine since I was younger than 1 year old. And so I identify as a Maine person. And so working with Maine people and community members with different identities, having them come in and speak, having them present, setting up opportunities for them to table, to host events, to sponsor partnerships, and things like that is a great way to build build relationships. Representation, I think, is a great one that we've really focused on, whether it's in the materials, like, right, having the place on campus where you can pray listed in your syllabus is representation, right? Like, these things are representation, including mental health resources for students, and in a syllabus is important. You know, students in the month of October, first year students really struggle, right? Especially if they're new school, new expectations, new environment, probably maybe moved out of their parents' home. I know for primarily commuter schools that may be a little different, but it's still going to have a population that has that experience. I'm going to skip empowerment and trust. Celebrating diversity and cultural heritage. There's a really easy template to do all of this work in, and that's the cultural awareness, right? Bulletin boards, newsletters, social media posts, announcements, posters, emails with a heading or a couple images. For really minimal effort, you can at least show that you're aware that it's Black History Month, or you're aware that it's Pride Month, or you're aware it's Women's History Month, or you're aware it's Islamic Awareness Week, or you're aware it's Coming Out Week, or Suicide Prevention Week, or kids with disabilities, and different things. And so having sections of the building that highlight what month it is, right? So when you're walking past, oh, it's Black History Month. In this office, they've made an effort to acknowledge that it's Black History Month. That's important to me. Or it's Pride Month, or it's Coming Out Week. Not only is there some resources and there's probably some rainbow themed stuff, but maybe there's some services and supports, or at least some contacts of individuals that students and communities can connect with if they're struggling during that week for a variety of different reasons. Women's History Month. It takes very limited effort to find, female-bodied people, women, people who identify as women, or anywhere on that spectrum of gender identities, and find accomplishments from Mainers, and put that up and highlight, hey, here's some great people in our community who have done some incredible work, and represent them. So yeah, and the reason I skipped empowerment and trust is because it doesn't really matter if you do posters and policies and cultural attitudes and outreach and representation, all that stuff, if it's not authentic. If your faculty, if your staff, if your students don't trust it, and they don't trust you, then, and you're not empowering them to be represented, to share their voice, to speak about their identities, to support each other, then it's all for naught without that. And I think that's synonymous with a lot of different things on a campus and a lot of different relationships. If the people you're serving don't actually authentically believe you're there to support them, then it's just window dressing. So we are going to wrap up with some goal settings. Like I said, again, this is just why does this look so ridiculous? I forgot I zoomed in to do the other exercise. Okay. Now it's probably too small. Who knows? So we are going to go over goals. We're going to set some goals. So at this point, everybody should have a broader understanding and awareness of what we've talked about, and some really clear-cut examples of at least a couple of things that you can do immediately to make your space at least more equitable, And one of those things is just looking around and writing down what safe and unsafe characteristics there might be in that space. So one of them is just something else you're going to do in the meantime. So anyways, so let's write down our goals for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So with this, we're going to write down what's the short-term goal that you have, right? It could be to learn more about the supports that students who are re-entering the community may need after maybe being incarcerated. It's maybe learning about what recovery resources are on campus for students who are in recovery. What supports are there for students who are also parents juggling with childcare and transportation, right? There's a lot of different things that can be listed. So list a short-term goal and then what resource or support you would need to accomplish that goal. And then write down your long-term goal with what resource or support you would need to accomplish the long-term goal. And short-term can be, the rest of this semester, early next semester. Long-term could be, a year or 2 years down the road. Okay, so we have only about 7 more minutes. So if people want to share what their goals are, that would be great.
I'll share first. So I'm in the Mountain View facility, so I'm incarcerated as well. And one of my short-term goals was to get my minimum, and I actually just got my paperwork saying that I'm now a minimum inmate. So now my long-term goal is to get with my fiance and start our family, and that's in 3 years. So, and
Is it-
then,
So you're scheduled to be released in 3 years.
yep.
I just want to say I really appreciate you coming. I really appreciate you being here, especially doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And I'm glad that this is a resource that's offered. It makes me ecstatic that you're at Mountain View and that you can be engaged in community enrichment and development while you're in there. I'm very glad you attended.
Yeah, I'm very thankful that I was able to attend. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Wayne. Hey, and sorry for calling you Alan. It said Alan on your name first, but I see you changed it.
Yeah.
See you changed it now. So great. So what else do we have for short-term goals?
I'm
I
in
don't know why
the
I keep looking away. Sorry. Go ahead.
I'm in the nursing program, and we have like a monthly newsletter that gets sent out. And one of the things that I had written down was just adding little things in there that I couldn't think of any words other than like more openness, but putting stuff in there for different holidays and putting stuff in there for different groups and resources and stuff like that. For me, June is a big month because I'm part of the LGBTQ community. And so having something in there, even if it's just like a little happy Pride Month with a little rainbow or something, I don't know, just something fun to put in there just to show, because I feel like there's not a lot of connectedness in the nursing program before you start doing clinicals and whatnot. So I thought that would be cool.
Yeah, no, that's great. And like I said, this is the easiest way to show awareness and inclusion and make people feel safe is to highlight the months that are important, right? These are important months for communities. These are months that communities had to face a lot of discrimination to even have acknowledged. So recognizing that in a way that's celebratory and not based on them being oppressed, but celebrating them is always great. What else do we have? What do people have for long-term goals for DEI? Ben, do you have anything? What do you have?
I would say for myself, definitely getting more involved with different types of DEI type projects, but also being able to hopefully offer more of these type workshops and trainings at UMA, and to help myself in my personal growth, because I feel as though like for DEI, it's kind of like a lifelong journey. There's so many different avenues to explore. There's so many different ways which you can improve your knowledge base. So that's one thing that I have for like a long-term goal.
Excellent. Excellent. I like that. DEI is a journey, right? It's not a destination, right? We're constantly learning and how we can support our coworkers and our colleagues and fellow students in a variety of different ways. I graduate next month, finishing my degree. What's your degree in? Sorry, I gotta figure this out. So the screen, everything is on this screen, but I'm just so used to looking at my computer. It's not necessary, and so I just sat here and tried scrolling down on my computer with my finger. I said, "Why is this not working?" I said, "Okay, it's not a touch screen. That's why it's not working." But anyways, it's been an experience. So thank you so much. As I said, I'll send this resource guide to everybody. I think it'll be really, really helpful. Wayne, do you have access to email?
I do.
Okay, so you'll get the guide as well. As I say, if there's a different way to send that to you, we could certainly do that.
Okay.
So use this guide as a resource in your spaces. If you're in a leadership role, if you're part of a student group, if you're part of a decision-making group. I know that Ben was talking about a diversity, equity, and inclusion kind of committee or subcommittee or group of people. I think these safety discussions and goal setting and some of the identity work would be, really important to start these discussions off with and build relationships and rapport and trust as a group. So that's it for me. That's pretty quick. I wasn't sure we are going to get everything in, but it's 2:30 exactly, and that's never happened. We usually end up missing a huge chunk of the training. It's never happened. We've never finished on time, but there's usually two of us. My coworker is out on leave right now, so it's just me. You're welcome.